Hey, everybody. Welcome to Our Voice Podcast. This is Neil Volz.
And this is Desmond Meade. I had to fight my way to get into this second episode.
Well, we let folks know, man, how busy things are going. We got the bus all over the place. We got job fairs happening. So, man, it's so great to see you, Desmond.
Yeah, man. It's a flurry of activities right before the holidays, man. And we have our turkey giveaway that's coming up pretty soon. I think next week is Thanksgiving, right?
That's right.
We got to get them birds out the door, man.
So, hey, man, we're talking to Josh Hoe, who I know we've been on his podcast, and we're just kind of talking a little bit about punishment. We're also talking about some of the progress that's been made in Michigan, where he's from, whether it's a clean slate or whether it's expungement reform. And so, man, jump on in.
What's up, Joshua? How you doing?
I'm good, Des. How you doing, man?
Listen, man, let me just start this segment out by saying, all hail the mighty Wolverines. May they beat the Buckeyes in the ground.
Oh, man.
Yeah, man, listen.
Unfortunately, that would be the first time in a long time, but I'm certainly hoping you're right.
Listen, we're gonna keep our fingers crossed, man. You know, it is so great to see those Buckeyes get knocked down a notch or two. You know, Neil been walking around here with his chest out for too many years now.
Josh, I told you, Des
if you were
going to
show up wearing your.
Des is still mad from 2002. I'm giving him 10 more years to get over it.
See, Josh, he don't even want you to speak now. What you were saying, Josh?
Go ahead, Josh.
I was going to say, I thought you might show up wearing your turnover chain from. I hear you're a Miami fan. Is that right?
Yeah. You know, anything coming out of Florida. You know, I'm a fan of anybody playing the Buckeyes. Right? Yeah, but definitely, I know we got Angel. Angel is a UM Law School graduate, so I know he's got some cane in him.
He does,
you know,
too.
and so he definitely. I think he's a little too young to remember when Ohio State stole that game from us.
That's
and,
hard word right there.
And matter of fact, picking up, I was listening in the first segment. You know, would you consider what Ohio State did to Miami a violent crime or a non-violent crime? You know?
I thought it was a good call, man.
I would say that was pure robbery, you know? Strong arm robbery. So we have to classify that as violent. But anyway, Josh, man, it's great to have you on the show, man. And I know you all been talking about some great stuff. And in the first segment, one of the things that you was talking about as far as with that distinction between violent and nonviolent, and how I believe that you lived with a person for over a year, and you never thought that that's a person that could snap and kill somebody, but that's exactly what that person did. You know, what I focus on a lot is, you know, me personally, I believe that violent and nonviolent distinction is purely political, right? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense to me, right? Because even if you have a person that may have committed a less serious offense, and you have another individual that may have committed a more serious offense, say aggravated battery or whatever, and they're both released into the community. To me, the conventional wisdom says that we want both of them to successfully reintegrate, right? And we don't. Why would we put up barriers for people to successfully reintegrate because of the nature of their crime, right?
Well, on top of that, wouldn't you want the person you want to come back the most in the best possible shape is the person who committed the worst crime?
Yeah,
right?
I know, right?
You don't want them.
You ought to give them extra. You ought to give them extra incentives and extra opportunities. You know, it's like I said, I think it's very political. And one of the things that we do at FRC is that we try to move away from even using that terminology too much, man. You know.
Yeah, it was actually created as a political move.
That's what it was.
You know, there's a book. It's the James Foreman Jr. book that won the Pulitzer, where he goes into the history of how that distinction started. And it was actually the Holder, the AG under Obama, before he was ever Attorney General, he was in D.C., and that he actually was part of the way that started. There's a whole section in James Foreman Jr.'s book that talks about how that started. And it
no.
was purely political.
No, man, it had to be a Republican that started that, man. There's no way you're going to convince me that some Democrat started this violent, nonviolent crap, bro. There's no way. Come on, Josh.
I hate to say it, but in this case, I think this, as a Democrat, I hate to say it, but there's some evidence the other way on that one. And unfortunately, it's turned out to be politically true. You know what? It creates cover so that people who, no matter if they're Republican or Democrat, who want to seem like that they're for criminal justice reform can be for it without ever really having to risk much, because they take the least risky folks and the people least likely to have any issues, and that's the only people they help, and they help them over and over and over and over.
Well, somebody got to call that out. Right?
That's right. And it's amazing how casual it becomes, right?
Yeah.
You have conversation and people instantly just go right to this like, oh, well, we can do that for some, but not for others, right? Like there's this, how we see each other. They're just broken, man.
Yeah, there was a matter of fact, on the way to the studio, I was on a call and someone was telling me how, a commissioner actually filed this a motion to allow returning citizens to serve on boards in a particular city. And then at the end, it was like, only for nonviolent offenders. I was like, what? I mean, come on. A person who may have committed a more serious offense, all right, you can't diminish what kind of value they may bring. I mean, at the end of the day, you look at my charge, I can be considered a violent offender, and I mean, what you gonna say? Hey, Josh, I'm a genius now, right? And so...
and do the opposite, right? Because I remember going through my stuff, right? Bribing public officials, right? I learned to not read the comment section in the newspaper because there's folks who look at that particular charge and they're like, that guy should be dead. That guy should be sent out of the country, and I'm kind of like, oh, right? So it comes in a variety of different ways.
I'm still evolving, listen, these views, matter of fact, let me just say that these views are maybe not necessarily those of FRs.
Good point.
But, listen, I'm constantly evolving, and I'm at least at a point right now, Joshua, where I believe that if you are deemed good enough to be released back into the community, irregardless of what you do, then it is in society's best interest to, go above and beyond to ensure that you are able to successfully reintegrate back into the community, irregardless of whatever it is that you've done, right? And one of the analogies that I use, it talks about, perpetual punishment, right? Is even as a parent, right? When you look at it, someone does something, I could understand that you're mad at what they do. So my child, he does something wrong, I'm upset at my child. But one of the things I don't do, or I avoid doing, is actually meting out punishment while I'm angry, right? Because then that punishment is skewed and it's more emotional, right? And so I would even wait like a day, right? Then I would call like I remember my youngest son, I would just call him and I would actually have that conversation about what he did right, what he did wrong, right? And then talk about the consequences. And then if he gets a spanking, he gets a spanking then. But it's not a spanking that is driven by emotion because I was angry at what he did, right? I let that anger dissipate first, right? And then once he's punished, then once he serves his time, then all of that goes away. But what we have here is a system that even after, first of all, they punish you out of anger, right? Because a lot of these laws that are implemented are reactionary laws, right?
We see that
Something
all the time,
happens in the community, there's some outrage or whatever, and the politician would jump on it and then create these new laws,
One
right?
size fits all.
There
right?
you go. And so they punish, they punish you out of anger, right? Then even after the serve the time, they continue to punish you. And that's, if we were to do that to our kids, they would say that's abuse. And that is what society is doing. They're abusing people.
Well, we're seeing it right now in Central Florida, where there's this horrible case, right, with real tragedy, and there's the person who was responsible, returning citizen. So now legislation has been introduced to basically say nobody can be in that situation again, and it broadens it. Beyond.
Which case is this?
So this is the woman in Orlando, right, who turned up missing. And we found out that it was the person who was the maintenance guy had killed her. Right? Tragedy, right? Undeniable tragedy. And now we just found out in the last 24 hours that legislation has now been introduced that would say that nobody who's a returning citizen can work in that environment.
In what environment? You can't work in the housing?
Yeah, you cannot work.
So that's crazy. Right. That is just totally crazy. I mean, at the end of the
shouldn't govern by anecdote.
Yeah, definitely. Is it like that in Michigan, Josh?
Of course, I think it's like that everywhere. The first reaction whenever there's a terrible crime is for them to use that anecdote to create new legislation. I did want to suggest one thing. I mean, I know you all know a little bit about John Brown, right? Civil War era John Brown. There's this great story about when his kids were younger, that he got really mad at one of his kids and spanked him. But right after that, he told his kid to spank him. And the reason why was because it was his fault in the way that he was raising the kid. He wanted the kid to understand that he was part of the problem too. And, I think that's the part we lose a lot, is this kind of our relationship to the society we create and the problems that it generates. We're so allergic to this notion that we've created systems that have flaws, and that we've been part of reinforcing that system, that we don't want to take any responsibility on ourselves. Like when we have a death penalty case and someone unfortunately gets killed, I often feel like that's partially my fault. I'm part of the reason why that's possible, even though I oppose the death penalty absolutely. And I think if we took more time to think about what our punishments say more about us than they do about the people we're punishing, we'd probably see things a different way.
Josh, in the previous interview with Amanda Knox, right, you said that we as a society have to become outcome focused instead of punishment focused. Could you explain what that means? Because I think that's just so pertinent to what you just said.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, we don't look at, if you look at our systems of incarceration, our legal system, and you look at the outcomes, you'll see that, by any stretch of the imagination, what we're doing is a gigantic failure. We have high recidivism rates. We don't have good reentry. We don't have good systems for trying to address the real problems that are created. There's still a lot of violence in prisons. There's still a lot of contraband being brought in by officers in prisons. There's, we could go through the thousands, there's bad healthcare. There's no outcome where we go, man, that's really working. And if our goal is to have people come back whole, to have people come to the communities and make the communities better, to make systems in our communities safer, then we need to base everything we do on outcomes, not on if we punish them or not. Because who cares if at some level you care, but I care more about accountability than punishment.
But what if that's not what if that's not what society wants, or what is, maybe this is not what society is considering, right? Because you're talking about outcomes. Nobody is, come on, how many people are thinking, yes, let's get this guy who did something wrong, and they thinking so far ahead that they're like, okay, and then we want to make sure that he comes back whole, and no, they want to punish that person and get him out of their sight, right? Out of sight, out of mind. Let's just lock them up, throw away the key. So the thing about it is, if society is not goal-oriented, right, then how could the punishment be goal-oriented or outcome-focused?
Well, I think you're right. I think you're right. That's we talked about, Neil and I talked about this a little while ago with the media. Most people have spent their entire lives hearing nothing but stories about how we need to punish people. They've seen a million television shows, a million movies, that the answer to everything is more punishment. The way the news reinforces that. There's whole reasons why, and it's going to take a lot of time to break that down. But one of the ways we've got to break it down is by convincing people that their lives will be better if they look at it a different way. And the only way we can make people's lives, the only way we can put people in that context is to make them feel the data, make them feel the reality of what happens when we fail. Most of the things that they're afraid of are happening because this system fails, not because the police are succeeding or not because the criminal justice system is succeeding. It's because it's failing.
So Josh, can we dig a little deeper onto that question? Because I'm sitting there like, I love this platform, right? Like the ability to really dig into issues is important. And
well, shout out to our friends at Fireside.
That's right. That's right. What's up, Fireside? And everybody who's taken part, man. It's really cool to see this thing kind of take off and people interact and send text messages and respond on YouTube and all that. But I look back at like Amendment 4, right? There was an early part of the kind of communication process with Amendment 4. Des is driving all over the state for years and years. And, I get attached to that movement with Des as well and start driving all over the state. And there was this moment where, man, we felt like if we had 20 minutes with somebody and a cup of coffee, you could get somebody to rethink Amendment 4, right? Because a lot of times folks would be like, oh, hey, man, you do the crime, you do the time. And the two of us, at least, we love to talk to those folks, right? I remember like folks who were volunteers and be like, oh, man, I just didn't even deal with them. I'm like, oh, send them to me,
Hey, Josh, we call them Beretta followers. You remember Beretta? Don't do the crime if you can't do the time. Yeah. Don't do it.
Sad but true. So like in that moment, right, when you had some time and you could like talk to somebody, right, we could do that. How do we do that in this environment, right, where every day you can wake up with the algorithm on your phone feeding you the worst thing that the enemy or somebody on the other side or whatever you fear just gets fed to you, and it becomes very hard to communicate and change that narrative that is really embedded in so many of us, especially some folks who like, man, that's how they see the world, right? It's like, man, I want my security. I want, and so like Des said, man, you did something. I just want to lock you up and throw away the key and I don't even want to see you again, without fully realizing that 96% of people are coming, right? So like that there's a longer life to this story than just that momentary moment in time. And I've immense respect for the whole process in Michigan, what we've seen in terms of, getting things done. I'm curious about how the tools that you might have been able to pick up over time in terms of changing that narrative in environments that aren't like this, where you can actually slow down and pick things apart and deconstruct what we're talking about.
Well, I think the first thing you said is really important, which is algorithms are a problem. Because basically what algorithms do is they ensure that all of us never, so if we were on the other side of this issue, those people would never see us. They select us out because they only send them the messages they want to see. And so that is a huge challenge. And I think one of the reasons why we were able to get, over 40 pieces of legislation passed in the last few years in Michigan is because Michigan doesn't operate like Twitter or YouTube or whatever, at least at the legislative level. Lansing is a city in the middle of the state that has, basically not near any of the population centers. The legislators come there. They're not surrounded by those pressures, and you can actually sit down and talk to them just like you and Des did when you're going around the city around the state of Florida talking about Amendment 4. And the truth is, most state legislators, at least in Michigan, are regular folks. They're not professional legislators. A few of them might be, but most of them are doing it for the right reasons. And then we may be on different sides of the aisle or whatever, but everybody has, at least in my experience here in Michigan, most of the legislators have the best interest of their constituents at heart. I know that sounds very like old school movie, but that has been my experience.
Are you saying that politicians are people too, Josh?
I'm saying that state politicians in Michigan are people too. Yes.
And Josh is messing with my head, man. He's talking about these guys just having the needs of the people first, and he already accused the Democrat of coining that violent versus nonviolent.
He's blocking my dehumanization of Michigan fans, all of it, man, just blowing it up.
What else you going to throw at us, Joshua? I mean, come on, let's get it over with now.
Well, I'm not going to say that it means that everything is sunshine and roses and it's just easy to get stuff done, but it is true, and I think you all prove this, that when you get the chance to sit down with someone and have real conversations, it can make a difference, which means the way through this is finding ways to break through the algorithms, to actually have human communication, to actually really talk to the people you disagree with. And so much of what we're doing right now is the opposite of that. We're running to our silos instead of having conversations with each other. And I'm not saying it's always working. There are some people who are bad actors and bad faith actors who don't really want to their interest isn't to make a better society. It's to make themselves more powerful or whatever it is they're trying to do. However, there are still an awful lot of people on both sides of the aisle and in every situation that if you sit down with them and have a conversation and you really talk about things, you can make progress. And to me, that's what you got to do. And you got to find ways to do that. And you got to, I guess, blow up and circumvent the algorithms because those are working against us in every possible way.
Blow it up.
Yeah, that's right. Blow up the algorithm.
Wow.
That's powerful, man.
Wow, that's cool. And so, Josh, let's move on a little bit, right? We talk about, just the outcome being outcome focused, right? Michigan just recently expanded their expungement process with the adoption of a clean slate law that I heard through the grapevine that you helped advocate for. Could you talk about what this new policy, public policy, includes?
Yeah, we talked about a little bit earlier on the first first part of the episode. And, it's really, I think, of all the things I've worked on, it's one of the things I'm definitely the most proud that we got through. There's some evidence that as many as 1 million people could be helped in Michigan.
1 million?
Wow.
Are you trying to catch up with us, Josh? Are you trying to catch up with me and Neil? You about 400,000 short, buddy. Right? So
we can't catch up with you on Amendment 4. That's too many. You got a much bigger state than we do. There's not much I can do on that one.
But 1 million
but I'm still pretty proud of it. I'll
still
sit with it.
So is that people who've been arrested,
basically
people who
the law
have been convicted? That there's a broad group of anyone who's got a criminal background. How do you get to 1 million, man?
So this is one of the broadest expansions of expungement that's happened in the United States. It did two things. The first thing it did was expand. We already had an expungement in Michigan, but it was very limited and there were some problems with it. And so we expanded the petition process quite broadly. And so people can now, even right now, that went into effect last April, can apply to have their, there's so many, almost all misdemeanors. There's very few misdemeanors that can't be expunged now. And, the vast majority of charged crimes and things that people are sentenced for are misdemeanors. And so if you get where most people can clear almost all misdemeanors, you're getting into the hundreds of thousands of people in each section of those. The largest, most of the one of the largest drivers of incarceration and fines and fees and everything else in Michigan is driver's stuff. And, almost always stuff that's not related to a criminal record. And that's another thing we passed last year was getting rid of incarceration based on driver's license revocations that were not related to driver safety. And that, one of the biggest drivers of incarceration in Michigan. So these are the kind of things when you get into those kind of things. Okay. So the second thing that our expungement package did is create clean slate, which I know you all are both very familiar with. That goes into effect in 2023.
And that's automated, right?
And that's automated. And that's going to happen automatically and get a huge chunk of people expunged without them, just basically having to wake up and get out of bed. Well, they don't have to go to court and they don't have to pay anything and they don't have to put in a fingerprint and they don't have to do any of that nonsense.
Well,
we're going to get a lot of.
I got to beat Neil to the punch on this because So we got to give a big shout out to Sheena Meade and the Clean Slate Initiative. Neil would normally beat me to the punch and then have my wife say, "Honey, you don't even say anything nice about me. Only Neil says something nice."
And I was getting ready.
Yeah, I knew you were
we
getting
had
ready
the
to say
celebration.
That's why I had to cut you off, Josh, because I'm telling you, I could not let Neil beat me to the punch on this one. And so give a huge shout out.
I don't want you to
Meade.
get in trouble with Sheena. And when we had the celebration of it passing, the webinar we did for it with all of the people who were involved in passing it, the moderator for that webinar was Sheena Meade because we were partners throughout. Yeah. So I know not to get Sheena mad too.
Yeah, you're a wise man.
That's exactly right. So how's the automated process work? Like you talked about, like, hey man, you could wake up and the system's at work like that, man. That's transformational. So can you like kind of just talk through that a little bit more in terms of what that looks like?
Well,
hold on.
This gets back into algorithms,
Josh,
unfortunately.
Hold up for a minute. Before you do that, right, I think we have to give that distinction. In Florida, right?
Thank you.
In Florida, if a person wants to seal their arrest, right, number one, it have to be an arrest that don't result into a conviction, right? And then there's a very short list of acceptable charges. And so if they fit the criteria, first of all, they have to fill out an application that goes to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, right? And they have to submit a $75 check to Florida Department of Law Enforcement. And then Florida Department of Law Enforcement will issue some type of certificate saying that now they're able to go to a court. And so they have to file a motion in the court and then hope that the judge would grant their motion to seal their record. That's what, and you can only do it one time, right? And you can only do it for one offense unless there more than one offense that was part of a continuing episode, right? And so that's the process.
Yeah, that's like our.
That's the process that
that's
Florida
like
has to
our
go
old
through.
Petition process.
So so now talk about this automation.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I jumped right to the end.
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is the nice thing about the expansion of our petition process is our petition process used to be a little bit like that. And in some ways it's still like that, but we can clear multiple felonies and almost all misdemeanors now through the petition process. Now you still have to go to court and you still have to pay the fee. It's not as much here as it is there. And you still might get denied, but you at least have the chance to get rid of a lot more stuff through the petition process. And like I said, a lot of felonies are included, a certain number, and it's certainly not just one. It depends on what class of crime, and it would be a little bit hard for me to go through all the different ways that it works, but it's a lot of folks. Now, the automatic process, we were the first state in the country to expand not just get the automatic process, but have it actually include some felonies. So you get a lot of misdemeanors and some felonies automatically will be cleared by the expungement process based on the number of years you remain crime-free.
What does that automation process look like? That's what I want to get at.
So there's 83 counties in Michigan, and really the complicated reason and the reason why it's taking so long is a lot of those counties operate on different systems. There's not one computer system that works for the entire state. And so one of the things we're doing right now is people are working on trying to make all of those systems, or at least to write code that allows all of those systems to talk to each other. Once that gets done and all the technical fixes are done, then literally all those things will just automatically be expunged on the active date. And so you don't have to do anything. You just, like I said, you just get out of bed, and you may not know it. You may have to look up on the website to see, that it happened, but it'll happen if you look or you don't look.
So
it'll just automatically be expunged.
There's no requirement to ask for it to be done.
No.
Don't have to go to court.
Don't have to go anywhere. Don't have to pay anything. Don't have to do anything. It just happens.
Wow.
And so we know the real world ramification of that is when people get their record cleared, right? The ability to get a job, the ability to get housing, right? The ability to move forward with your life, right? It exponentially goes through the roof, right?
Yeah, when I give speeches about this, what I always talk about is that, for many people, for the first time in decades, they'll be able to walk into an apartment complex and feel like they can get a safe place to live. And for the first time in decades, they can walk into a job interview and feel like they actually have a real chance. And for every single person that gets to do that, it is a magical moment. I mean, I know all of us have been in that situation where you walked into a job interview and felt like there was no chance in hell that you were going to get that job. And every one of us has walked into an apartment complex and known by the look on their face that they wanted to take our money for applying for the apartment, but had no intention of ever giving us a safe place to live.
Wow.
And this is going to change people's lives.
Well, Josh, listen, I don't know if Neil have told you, because you know these Buckeyes are ungrateful. Let me be the first to tell you, man, thank you for your advocacy work. Thank you for fighting for people less fortunate. Thank you for fighting for people like me, man, and fighting to not only improve my life, but the lives of people around me, man. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, man, we really appreciate that, and I know we got to kind of close out this second segment of the podcast. I do have one quick question, if I could, because I know you've done a lot of podcast work, Josh. Are there some like kind of lessons learned or some interviews, man, where people really like challenged you, or there was something that you kind of took away from that? Des and I definitely try and learn from other people, because, man, if I got to learn from my own mistakes every single time, that takes a toll.
That's a lot of learning.
That's exactly right. So there's some like kind of, and I know we got to close this thing out. We're getting it from the guys here, but there are some quick lessons that you could share with us from your experience as somebody on podcast.
Top two,
top
Josh.
2 maybe.
All right. I'd say the number one thing that I learned, and I take this very seriously, I would like on my podcast, and it's very hard because you want your personality to come through, but on every episode, what I really hope is that people barely remember me and mostly remember the guest. I really work extremely hard to make it as much about them as I can. And that's hard because, as you can tell from this podcast, I'm a talker and I like to, I got a lot to say about a lot of things. And so it took me a long time to kind of change the way I looked at as an interviewer, as opposed to someone who's giving a speech or someone. And you all are great at that too. But I think that took me a while, and that was that was one of the hardest things I was learning. And the second thing, and I think this is hopefully helpful to everyone who's listening, is that the entry requirements for doing a podcast are extremely low. When I know people don't believe that, and I know they've got a studio and I've got a nice mic and all that kind of stuff. But the truth is, when I first started podcasting, I had a $25 mic and a bad laptop computer. And at a cost of about $60 a month, I was putting out a podcast, and now I'm to the point where I have put out, I think it's 120 episodes or something like that, 124 maybe, something like that. And, you can, if this is something that interests you and you feel like you have something to share and you have an idea and you have a vision, don't feel like you can't do it, because you can. You just have to learn some basic software for sound. Mm-hmm. And after that, you'll get better and you'll meet people help you. And over time, it'll get better and better and better. Fake it till you make it. All of us who've done time know about the hustle. You got to put your time in and you got to hustle, but you can do this, and it's fun and it's worth it. And if you got something to say, share it with the world, and maybe it'll do well.
I mean, you almost sound like an AA room. Right?
That's right.
You fake it till you make it. Keep working because it works if you work it. So work it, you're worth it.
Yeah. Right? Trust the process, right?
Yeah. Well, Josh, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate having you on our show, man, and hopefully we'll bring you back in the very near future, man.
That's right. Thank you so much, Josh.
Man, I really appreciate it. Love you guys.
Right. Always appreciate your support in our efforts too as well, bro.
All right. Have a good night, man.
Yep.